Hello, my name is Tanya Verquin. It is my pleasure and privilege to offer this special presentation to celebrate the 8th anniversary of the Global GHK Foundation, an organization committed to helping ensure the learning and continued access to these remarkable discoveries of Dr. Hamer's The Biological Laws of Nature. I'm the host of a podcast called Pixelated Perspectives, and that podcast is all about offering alternative perspectives into our health and well-being through the lens of GNM or GHK to ultimately help people gain new insights and awareness around what's going on with them. I also run a monthly membership community, which is online. It's called New Perspectives Membership. And this is a platform that's really dedicated to teaching the biological laws of nature in a group setting, a virtual group setting, using case studies, what's going on in each other's lives, and our life experiences. We regularly invite guest speakers to come on and join our live group calls and share their expertise in the topics of GNM, GHK. And in fact, a number of members from the Global GHK Foundation have been hosted in this membership. So it is really my honor to do this short presentation by sharing a story to highlight how when we have an onset of intense symptoms, that it is possible to, instead of turning to fear and stress and confusion around symptoms, we instead look at them as signposts. We gather the information that really our symptoms are telling us, and we learn how to make the correlations to those symptoms and what we've just recently been through. And excuse me, by making these correlations, what it allows us to do is be able to switch our mindset around feeling panicky and fearful whenever we do have an onset of symptoms or long-standing conditions. Because anytime we're confused or fearful and thinking that our body's doing something wrong, this is just going to, it's going to heighten our experience of our symptoms more than is necessary. So I've been able to, for more than a decade now, live virtually free of fear and panic regarding symptoms and symptoms of my family. I've been able to raise my family with the understanding of these laws that are inescapable, these biological laws that we all live under, including the animals and plants in nature. And so just with the understanding that, number one, symptoms are not malfunctions. They're not our body showing there's a dysfunction somewhere. It's not our cells turning and attacking one another. You know, this whole paradigm and concept of symptoms being malfunctions and something to worry about and something to fix is really what leads us into living with fear about our health and our symptoms. And so to lead us out of that really requires an understanding that symptoms are truly intelligent adaptations that are there that were there put in place by the wisdom of our biology to help us cope during unexpected distress. And so just by learning that, which is the first biological law of nature, that every symptom or so-called disease or condition is initiated by a DHS, which is a conflict shock, something that totally caught us off guard, something that was emotionally dramatic and isolated felt to us. So when those three criteria are met, our body instantly begins to make adaptations, and they are to help you, the individual, cope during that distress. And so for animals in nature, these conflicts are very literal. You know, this is a matter of life or death in a lot of times for the animals in nature. But for us, our conflicts aren't always life and death. They're more figurative. They're perceived in a figurative sense that, okay, I'm not running from a lion, but that conflict had my body respond as if I was running from a lion. So just to highlight this, I wanted to share a brief story about an experience that I had a couple months ago, which led to an onset of multiple symptoms very intensely that lasted, about a week, from anywhere from a couple hours to a week, all from one situation. And because I'm aware that these laws are applying to us and that we can't escape these laws of our biological nature, I knew that these symptoms were brought on by a very specific event, which I could easily correlate because for the last decade, this is what I've been able to do is, and thankfully, because it's what has allowed me to live without the fear and stress and confusion around our symptoms, mine and my family's. So it also, one other thing that it did allowed me to do is when I had this huge onset of symptoms that were intense, I wasn't looking for a cause external to, like, in the environment. I wasn't, thinking about, oh, yeah, I could have got it from somebody because it happened in the airport. My conflict started in the airport. And for many people who aren't aware of these biological laws of nature and aren't aware of the fourth biological law, the law of the microbes, and that they are absolutely meaningful and necessary and part of nature's cleanup crew, well, then I could have easily blamed all of these symptoms that I was presented with as something that I, just caught from people in the airport who were also sick. And so again, you can see how that way of thinking leads to fear because you're literally left powerless if that's your mindset and that's your paradigm, what you subscribe to. So these biological laws of nature, GHK, this body of work really does allow you, even with the most basic understanding, to live with at least very minimal fear with symptoms for you and your loved ones, just by understanding a very basic level. So here's my story. And actually, I will share my screen just because I want to give you an idea of all in really a split second. And here's what we've got. So here's the scenario. Okay, I was just finishing up from a beautiful week-long retreat in Italy. We were just outside Rome in the beautiful Italy countryside, and this was in October, so it was still beautiful, lush and green and warm. And the group of women I was with, it was all about wellness and expanding our business and really learning new tools and strategies. And it was just such a beautiful experience all around. So a week literally being in bliss. Okay, so this was my state at the end of the retreat. So just imagine, I'm on cloud nine and I have to fly now out of Rome to the Paris International Airport to catch my connecting flight back home to Canada. And being in the state I didn't do anything to prepare or even to research what the Paris International Airport was like, where I would have to go once I arrived, like where would I find, my other airline that I'm going to be catching to go home. The thought didn't even cross my mind. So this is really important when it comes time to thinking about our conflicts in the state we're in at the time, because our conflicts, we can perceive conflicts in totally different ways, or we can perceive them where we normally wouldn't experience a conflict in these scenarios had we been in a different state of mind. So it's very in the moment, a split second moment when something catches you off guard, it's all how you are, how your state of being is, that determines how intense that symptom or that conflict registers at the level of the brain. And then the brain gives the correspondent organs or tissues the message to begin their intelligent adaptation. So either tissue loss or tissue proliferation or function loss, okay, impairment. And it all depends on how you are in that moment that catches you off guard. So for me, I was on cloud nine. I was completely oblivious to the due diligence I should have done on my part to prepare for me catching that connect and flight. But I didn't, okay? Just completely oblivious, just totally in a blissful state, just finishing off this beautiful retreat and going home. Can't wait to share my experience with my family. And here it begins. So in Rome, I was going to be flying to the Paris International Airport, and I only had 2 hours from once I landed in Paris to catch my connect and flight. And I was thinking, yeah, no problem, right? Like it can't be that hard. And so we are delayed in Rome before we even, take off for Paris an hour. So already I could feel like my hands are cold. I'm getting a little bit stressed now. My thoughts are obsessively thinking about, okay, yeah, I probably should have figured out where I was going to go once I got into the airport in Paris. So this is where it begins. Okay, so this is the scenario. So late arrival from Rome to Paris. Once I got to Paris, I was now starting to panic because I realized the time is ticking and I have no idea where the terminal is now, where the wicket is, so that I can make my connect and flight. Had I done my due diligence, I would have discovered that the Air France terminal is the airline I flew into on. It is just one terminal. It's one building, and there's no other airlines in that building. So the Paris International Airport is massive. It extends for kilometers, and my connect and flight was nowhere near, not in the terminal, but nowhere near that terminal either. So here I am running around like someone who's literally being chased by a lion, trying to communicate with the people in the airport. And just in the state of mind I couldn't understand them. And normally, I have a fairly proficient understanding in French when I speak it to other people, but I was just so hyped up now. My mind was just focused on a solution. And so when they were talking to me, I couldn't understand them. They were talking so fast. And so it just wasn't working. And I happened to, at least another half an hour later, come across this small little wicket that said WestJet, which was the flight that I'm looking for to go home on. And so I run up to the lady there, and she proceeds to look at her watch and say, you are running really late. And she's, very concerned that I might miss the flight, but she directs me to security, and I rush there. We're in security. I'm in the line of security now for at least another half an hour. So at this point, the boarding time it's already happened. Like it's already on. I'm still in a lineup in customs or in security. And so you can just imagine, right? My state, I'm frustrated. I am fearful that I'm going to miss my flight. And all the while, when I'm going through this and my psyche has all these thoughts and I'm in the conflict, my body at the same time is undergoing all of these biological adaptations, okay, without my conscious awareness. I mean, I was consciously aware of my breathing, but for the most part, we're unconscious when we are in a moment of conflict. So long story short, I finally make it to through customs, through security, and then I reach this door that takes you outside, and it points to a sign to get onto a shuttle that will take me to the WestJet terminal. So by this time, like I'm thinking I've missed my flight, but I'm still going to get to that terminal I need to be at so I can try to find another flight. And by the time I got to that other terminal, at least a couple of kilometers away, well, it felt like it. I'm one of those people, like you see in the movies, that are just running out of breath, weaving through people, through the crowded masses of the airport, apologizing if I hit somebody. And I'm that person. And I was like, oh my goodness, looking back. But as I approached the boarding gate, it was still open. It still wasn't, it hadn't left yet. And so the moment I stepped through the threshold of that boarding gate, when you leave the airport and you actually step into the boarding like tunnel, right? Immediately, that was my resolution. That was my mind at ease saying, oh my gosh, I made it. Like I'm gonna make it home. And that is the same moment that I had an onset of this flurry of healing symptoms. I say healing symptoms, but for a person who isn't aware of the biological laws, they would just say symptoms, like scary symptoms. But we know that the symptoms are part of the healing phase. And so I'm going to share my screen with you now just to highlight the specific symptoms and kind of when they came on, just to help with the explanation a little bit. Okay, so I'm hoping that you will be able to see my screen now, and I will just zoom this in. So the very first symptom that just came rushing in was this uncontrollable cough. Okay, so seriously, I'm not even lying when I'm saying, or exaggerating when I'm saying, the moment I step through that threshold, the symptoms hit. So immediate coughing starts, and coughing so much that I couldn't, it was really, really hard to catch my breath. Like every time I'd breathe in, I would begin coughing again. Immediately with the coughing, my nose started to just pour. It was just running and running, and my eyes started to water and water. And so here I am, I'm having this coughing fit. My nose is watering, my eyes are watering. I'm a complete mess. If someone were to look at me in that moment, they'd be like, whoa, like what's going on? Are you okay? And just think of this situation being in an airport, for the vast majority of people who are unaware of the biological laws of nature, they would be so scared that I could be spreading some sort of illness or virus, right? So we see this through a whole new lens now. We see these symptoms as, wow, let's actually make the correlations to what these symptoms, like where they came from. Why was I coughing? Why was my nose running? Why were my eyes watering? And it really begins to tell the story. And we begin to learn how we perceive our conflicts, or how we perceive them for sure in that scenario. And it teaches us about our own psyche. It teaches us also about the wisdom of our bodies. So obviously with the coughing now, it was a coughing fit. So this was a fear of the territory, the bronchial mucosa. I was my or estrogen levels were low, so this is why is the bronchial mucosa program for me. And so it produced these symptoms that now the bronchial mucosa was now refilling, right? It was an ulceration while I was healed or in conflict active phase, right? To open up the passageway to allow more oxygen so I could breathe better while I was in that state of mind where my mind thought I was running through, or my biology thought I was running from a lion, but in reality, I was just frantic to make this flight. The nose, the program of the nose with the running nose. This is the the mucosa, the nasal and sinus mucosa, and this is all about a conflict of annoyance or a stink conflict, or the scent of danger. And so while you're conflict active with this program, when any time you perceive either, oh my gosh, this is so annoying, or this situation stinks, or there's a scent of danger, then there will be ulceration, tissue loss in the nasal mucosa. And that is to allow, again, better breathing, better scent intake while you're in conflict activity. And then when you heal that, the conflict's resolved, then that has to refill, replenish. And this is all of the liquid and the congestion. With the eyes, this was both eyes. And so this has to do with a visual morsel, right? A visual morsel contact where my tear glands were involved. And so on one side, on the right side, I couldn't see, I couldn't catch the morsel, right? And for the left eye, I couldn't eliminate the morsel. So when the tear glands are involved, this sight morsel has to do with an ingoing and outgoing. So I couldn't find the place I needed to be. And I couldn't get rid of the sight that I was still in the same place going around and around in circles. So both eyes were involved, massive tears. Okay. Also part of what was going on there. So the coughing fit, the runny nose, the congestion, the running eyes. I also had a headache, a really bad headache in that moment. And I was also sweating a lot. Now, sweating could be part of any intense healing phase. It could be part of any program in healing. It also is part of a conflict active phase if you're feeling soiled or disfigured. And so we would really have to look at, okay, really get it down on paper and be really clear on how my psyche perceived that. So these first 5 symptoms, immediately after walking through that threshold of the boarding gate, this is what happened immediately. The coughing subsided gradually over probably 40 minutes. It started to really subside and calm down. I was able to take in a breath, a very shallow breath, but still be able to do that without going back into a coughing fit. Gradually, I had to then urinate, start to go to the bathroom. And luckily, where I was sitting in the plane, I was close to a washroom. And again, with the having to pee now a lot and urinate, this is the healing phase of the KCT program, the kidney collecting tubule program. And anytime this program is initiated is when we perceive that it's an abandonment or a refugee or an existence conflict or something in line with that. So being on your own, like a fish out of water, where you don't belong, you literally feel like your life is at stake. This type of conflict would initiate this program. And so being on that plane, again, was that healing to feeling like a fish out of water, to feeling like, oh my goodness, I'm on my own. No one's here to help me. I can't understand anybody. I couldn't find anybody to help. And now that I was on the plane, you can see how it would come into resolution. The conflict was resolved. The other one that came on as I was going home is just sheer exhaustion, sheer exhaustion. And of course, this is part of that bagatonic phase, that rest and digest phase. It's going to be more intense the more intense the conflict activity is, right? Anytime it's super intense conflict activity for an extended period of time without any downgrading, then the healing phase will be the same intenseness. And so this sheer exhaustion, it literally knocked me out for 2 hours. So the flight attendants had already gone and come back with the drinks and the menus. I slept through it all. I was just completely exhausted. And so again, being able to correlate these symptoms. I also had pain all over my body. Like my skin was super hard, super painful to touch. It just hurt. My skin hurt. And if you've ever had this, you know what I'm talking about, right? So this is lets us know that the periosteum, right? This is the program with this one, and it's an intense separation conflict. It's a severe separation conflict. And so I was to be able to, I could definitely correlate having a separation conflict and feeling very severely separated from my family, because all I wanted to do was just to get home. You know, at that point when I was angry at myself because I hadn't done my due diligence and actually did some research to make this transition from one gate to the next easier for myself. I just, at that point, I wanted to get home. I didn't want to be anywhere other than with my family at home. And so being on the plane was definitely a resolution to that. And when I did finally get home, um, that's when other symptoms started to show up, like my stiff neck and my really sore spine, you know, right down the whole center of my spine. I was just aching and completely stiff. And that lets us know, that let me know. I also proceed to self-devaluation, an intellectually self-devaluation of feeling stupid, which I totally did, right? I should have researched this. I should have been more prepared. I shouldn't have been so naive and out to lunch when I was preparing to fly again halfway across the world back home. And then also just I felt devalued as a person. Like, man, I couldn't find where I needed to go. I couldn't communicate with anybody. I couldn't understand them and everything about it. I felt horrible, and I felt, you know, pretty down on myself. And so that all came into resolution when I was home with my family and I was able to talk it through and tell them about it, share my experience about it with them. And that really helped to bring things into just a better understanding. So, um, so with all of those symptoms, and as intense as they were, they lasted about a week. Now, the conflict activity, that phase did not last a week. It lasted for about, you know, max 4 hours. Okay. But everything is very synchronistic and in line when it comes to the intensity. So, again, the more intense our conflict is, the more intense that our symptoms will be as well, because everything is in unison. So as the psyche perceives an intenseness, the biological adaptations will be mirroring that, mirroring the same intensity. And there wasn't any sort of downgraded, you know, of downgrading or feeling a little bit better within that time frame at all. So it was like intense for 4 hours. And so that explains the symptoms in the healing phase lasting a little bit longer. It's because they were just so intense, and my body, that's how long it took my body to fully recover from that intense, emotionally dramatic situation that totally caught me on the wrong foot. It's like a textbook DHS. It really is, because it's relatable, but it also lets us know that you know, the more prepared we can be in life, the more we can prepare ourselves, like making plans and seeing to it that we're doing our due diligence and showing up as like responsible people, the less likely it will be that we'll be, when we have a conflict like that, that will be so dramatically impacted like I was. So, you know, had I been maybe just in a different province within Canada, or maybe just in the US, that's not halfway across the world, had I been in a different location, that would have not been so intense for me. But all of the, you know, it was like the perfect storm for the most intense conflict experience. It was being on the other side of the world, being completely alone, being somewhere where I didn't speak the language well, and not having a clue where to go. You know, I just didn't know that airport at all. So you can see how everything kind of aligned to be the perfect storm for that event. And my body showed me it was working, the system is working perfectly. And I was really grateful for the symptoms, even though they were very unpleasant to go through. I was grateful because it really shows me again, it's a reiteration, a reminder of just how we cannot we can't escape these biological laws. So if we can at least have an understanding about them, then this is what allows us to move through them. Although, you know, in spite of the discomfort, we don't have fear. And that is one thing through all of that experience of all of my symptoms, there was no fear involved because I understood why those symptoms were there. And it was a learning experience for me where I now know that even though I have a most amazing experience, I still can do my due diligence to prepare for what I need to do and not be in such a vulnerable position, not put myself in such a vulnerable position again. So I hope that just this example has been helpful, and maybe you can relate to it in some way of your own experiences being totally in, you know, in a vulnerable situation where you did experience really intense conflicts that resulted in equally intense healing symptoms. So thank you so much for watching and for your time, and I really appreciate being part of this beautiful foundation and on this mission to help preserve these biological laws, these remarkable discoveries of Dr. Hammers, and to help make it accessible, this knowledge accessible. Thank you so much for your time.